I met Anna when the world still felt infinite. We were 16, both restless in the way only the young could be, and life stretched before us like an endless summer. I remember her the way light falls on morning dew, soft, uncertain, but full of quiet promise. She wasn't the kind of beautiful that demanded attention, she was the kind that made you pause, unsure why your chest suddenly felt smaller. Her eyes were the color of unspoken things, and her smile carried a gentleness that disarmed even the loudest rooms. The first time I saw her, she was standing near the window of our high school library, her hair catching the sunlight like fine threads of gold. She wasn't reading, she was staring outside, lost in thought, as though the sky had whispered something only she could hear. I wanted to ask her what it said. But I was a boy who lived more in silence than in courage, so I walked past her, pretending to look for a book I didn't need. It took a few more encounters, accidental, deliberate, who could tell the difference at that age, before I found the nerve to speak to her. She laughed when I finally did, not out of mockery but surprise. "You're Ben, right?" she asked, her voice carrying a melody I would remember for decades. I nodded, trying to act as though her knowing my name wasn't the most extraordinary thing that had happened to me that week. We became friends in the way all great stories begin, slowly, with curiosity and 1,000 small moments that built something sacred without either of us noticing. We studied together, shared secrets under trees, and found poetry in ordinary things. I remember the scent of chalk on her fingers, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, the sound of her laughter breaking through the monotony of math problems and essays. There were afternoons when the world outside our conversations disappeared entirely. Once, after class, we walked to the old field behind the gymnasium. The sun was setting, and everything was drenched in that golden hour light that makes even dust look holy. She told me she wanted to be a writer, that she wanted to travel and see places where her stories could come alive. "And you?" she asked. I shrugged. "I just want to be where life feels real," I said, and she smiled as if she understood exactly what I meant. That was the thing about Anna. She understood. Even when I didn't say much, she seemed to know what I was trying to say. She made silence comfortable, and in a world that always asked us to speak, she gave me permission not to. We didn't call it love back then, but it was love. The kind that grows in quiet corners, nurtured by glances and gestures too subtle for the untrained eye. There was no confession, no grand moment. It simply existed, an unspoken truth that both of us carried carefully, afraid that naming it might ruin its fragile beauty. The night before graduation, I walked her home. The streets were dim, and the air smelled like rain. She was quiet, lost in thought, and I wanted to say something, anything, that could capture the ache of knowing that our paths might soon drift apart. Instead, she stopped in front of her gate, turned to me, and said, "Promise me one thing, Ben. Whatever happens, live your life well. Don't let fear make it small." I didn't answer. I just looked at her, memorizing her face in the half-light, wanting to freeze that moment forever. She smiled, softly, knowingly, and went inside. I stood there for a while after, listening to the sound of crickets and the faint echo of her footsteps fading away. I didn't know it then, but that was the last time I'd see her for many years. Life, as it often does, moved on without waiting for us to catch up. I went to college, got a job, learned to fill my days with responsibilities that dulled the sharp edges of youth. There were letters at first, occasional, warm, filled with the kind of stories that kept her alive in my imagination. But then they stopped. I told myself she was busy, that she had found her place in the world. Still, there were nights when I'd catch a glimpse of a woman in a crowd, or hear a laugh that sounded like hers, and my heart would stumble. Years passed. I met Romina at a small bookstore downtown. She had dark eyes and a voice that sounded like comfort. Where Anna was sunlight, Romina was the quiet evening that follows, a different kind of peace. She didn't make my heart race, she steadied it. We married in a small ceremony, surrounded by family and the kind of laughter that fills the cracks time leaves behind. Together we built a life of ordinary beauty, 2 children, Sunday dinners, long walks after the rain. I learned the language of companionship, the art of choosing someone every day. But sometimes, when the world fell silent, I still thought of Anna. Not out of longing, but remembrance. She existed in me like a half-finished song, one whose melody I could never forget. Romina knew. She never asked, never questioned. She understood that love doesn't erase what came before, it expands to hold it all. She used to say, some people are meant to stay in your story even if they're no longer in your life. I think she knew that Anna was one of those people for me. When Romina fell ill, the days grew long and heavy. I watched the woman who had been my anchor slip away slowly, her strength fading like the last light of dusk. She held my hand until her last breath, and even then, her eyes were kind. For a long time after, the house felt too quiet. The chair by the window remained empty, her cup still on the shelf where she left it. I learned to live with the silence, though it never truly left me. It was 5 years later when I heard the news. Anna had died. Anna died 5 years after my wife, Romina, passed away. The words came from an old classmate who found me at a reunion I almost didn't attend. I stood there, surrounded by faces from a life that felt like another lifetime, and suddenly, I was 16 again, standing by that library window, watching the girl who made the world feel new. I didn't say much. Just nodded, smiled faintly, and excused myself to the garden. Outside, the night air was cool, carrying the scent of rain. I looked up at the stars, wondering if she had lived the life she dreamed of, if she ever wrote the stories she once told me about. I imagined her older, maybe married, maybe not. I imagined her laughing the same way she did back then, head tilted, eyes bright. And I hoped she was happy, even if our paths had long diverged. I sat on the bench beneath a quiet tree, the kind that seemed to listen without judgment. My hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from the weight of remembering. 82 years, it sounded like a lot when you said it out loud, yet it felt no longer than the pause between breaths. Time had folded itself into moments, and in that folding, Anna remained. The girl by the window, the sunset on the field, the promise I never made but somehow kept in my heart. I thought of Romina then, her gentle way of humming in the kitchen, her steady presence through all the storms that life had thrown our way. If Anna was the dream of what could be, Romina was the grace of what was. With her, I built a life not of grand gestures but of small, enduring kindnesses. I remember the mornings we shared coffee in silence, the way she would reach across the table to touch my hand, as if to remind me that love didn't always need words. She had seen me through my ambitions, my fears, my quiet moods. And I had loved her, not as I loved Anna, no, that was a different song, but in a way that held the weight of years and the beauty of staying. Romina once found an old photograph of me and Anna, hidden in a box of memories I hadn't opened in decades. I braced myself for questions, explanations, but she simply smiled and placed it back where she found it. "We all have our firsts," she said softly, "but I'm glad I got to be your last." Now, sitting there under the soft hum of the evening, I realized how right she had been. Love isn't about comparison, it's about presence. Anna taught me how to feel, Romina taught me how to live. And though the two were different, both were true. I carried Anna's memory not as regret, but as gratitude. She was the page that began the story, but Romina was the book I spent my life writing. I closed my eyes and saw Anna again, not as she was in youth, but as I imagined her near the end, a woman with silver in her hair and laughter lines around her eyes. I wondered if she ever thought of me, if in some quiet moment she remembered the boy who walked her home in the rain. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. It didn't matter. What mattered was that for a brief moment in the long expanse of time, our hearts had known each other. Sometimes I think about how strange it is, the way life gives us love in so many shapes, and how each one teaches us something different. Anna showed me the beauty of beginnings, of dreaming without fear. Romina showed me the strength of staying, of choosing love again and again even when it becomes ordinary. Between them, I learned that love doesn't have to be forever to matter, it just has to be real while it lasts. As the wind rustled through the trees, I found myself smiling. The ache that once accompanied Anna's memory had softened with time, replaced by something gentler, quieter. It was no longer longing, it was peace. She had gone her way, and I had gone mine, and yet somehow, we had both arrived at the same truth, that love is not measured by the years spent together, but by the way it changes us. When I rose from the bench, the world felt calm. The stars blinked faintly, like old friends watching from afar. I thought of Romina waiting for me somewhere beyond this life, and maybe, just maybe, Anna too, each holding a piece of who I had been. I didn't know what waited on the other side of the horizon, but I hoped that when I crossed it, I'd see them both smiling. I walked home slowly, each step echoing softly on the pavement. The streets were nearly empty, save for the sound of crickets and the faint rustle of leaves. My house came into view, small and familiar, a vessel of decades and laughter and quiet tears. Inside, the clock ticked the same rhythm it always had, marking the passage of time I no longer feared. Before turning in for the night, I took out a pen and an old notebook. On the first page, I wrote her name, Anna. Beneath it, I wrote Romina's. Then I paused, letting my thoughts settle before I wrote one last line. Thank you for teaching me how to love, each in your own way. The ink bled slightly into the paper, spreading like the years between then and now. I closed the notebook and placed it on my bedside table. As I lay down, I could hear the soft hum of life outside, the whisper of the wind, the creak of the trees, the faint call of the night. I thought of that field again, the one where Anna and I had stood under the golden light, and I realized that somehow, in some quiet corner of my heart, that light had never gone out. It flickered still, not as a fire that burns, but as a glow that warms. And in that glow, I found the truth I had been circling all my life, that love, in all its forms, is not about forever. It's about moments, those brief, sacred flashes that remind us we were here, that we felt, that we mattered to someone once. I closed my eyes and smiled. Somewhere, in the vastness of memory and time, I like to think that Anna is still by that window, sunlight in her hair, watching the sky as if listening for something beyond it. And maybe, just maybe, she hears me too. In the end, love didn't need to be a single story. It was a collection of them, each one incomplete, yet together forming the map of who I became. Anna gave me the dream, Romina gave me the life, and both gave me the reason to keep my heart open even when time tried to close it. And that, I think, is what it means to live well, to love, to lose, and to remember. Not perfectly, not without pain, but fully. Because even when the years have taken almost everything, love remains, not as a ghost of what was, but as proof that once, we truly lived.